Welcome back to Pure Oxygen. Many of us would want our kids to be more worldly and certainly more tolerant. But to what extremes would you go to make sure that it happens? Well, journalist Deborah Copaken recently took her 6-year-old son Jacob to Pakistan, of all places. She recounts her story in this month's one of my favorite magazines, O Magazine, in an article called "I Am Very Sad Because My Heart is Bleeding." And she is here with us now to explain her decision to make the trip. I know, Deb, when we were talking in the office about you going, it was like, God, and she's got a 6-year-old son and she's going to go. So what was your thinking about taking the trip?
My thinking was that this was a very unique opportunity to show my son the ravages of war on a country, and his class had been raising money for the Afghani refugees, and I thought, let's just go do it and bring it ourselves.
But it's something that you wanted to do, and I think most people think from a mother's point of view, a mother's instinct, why would you want to take your son there, though?
Well, remember the context. It was right after September 11th. There were federal marshals outside my apartment building. The mail was having anthrax in it. It felt like, you know, why not go to Pakistan?
And Jacob wanted to go.
Yeah, he definitely wanted to go.
And I'm thinking, too, we'll get into the piece, but I'm thinking about the experiences that you and Jacob created together. Because along the trip, you all kept journals.
Yes.
Kept a journal of what was going on.
And he would write what he'd seen every night. And you know, one time he wrote, Osama bin Laden is a lot like Voldemort, which is the character from Harry Potter. So it's very interesting to see from a child's perspective what was going on.
So I wanted to make the point that the trip definitely had a purpose.
Oh, yeah.
It's not Deb said, hey, Jacob, let's go to Pakistan.
His class raised money for the Afghani refugees.
Right.
We decided to bring it over there ourselves because it got a little bit controversial within the class itself, where parents were saying, why are we bringing money to Afghani refugees? Isn't that like giving money to the enemy? And I just thought, no, that's not the way we should think about these things.
Well, as we mentioned, they kept a journal, and we'd like to bring you up to date on Deb and Jacob's trip to Pakistan.
Saturday, November 10th, 2001, somewhere over the Persian Gulf. Our world was turned upside down on September 11th, and emotions here in New York were running high and raw. But when America retaliated by bombing Afghanistan, a country already ravaged by war, I decided to return to Pakistan, where I'd been a dozen years before. My name is Deborah Copaken. I'm a writer, photographer, and now mother, but in my youth I covered wars. Last November, feeling helpless, I took my 6-year-old son Jacob on a mission of peace. To get to the Afghan border town of Peshawar, Pakistan, now home to some 3 million refugees, we traveled across 10 time zones, 2 continents, and one very long, dusty road. Sunday, November 11th, 2001, Islamabad, Pakistan. You know how many hours of flying it's been so far?
How?
We've been traveling for over 29 hours. And you haven't slept for most of that time. Kind of nutty, huh? Monday, November 12th, 2001, Peshawar, Pakistan. The road to Peshawar began in Islamabad. It seemed more crowded and overburdened than I remembered, its lanes choked with cars, horse and buggies, rickshaws, and trucks that looked more like miniature castles than like vehicles. Spilling over the edges of the road were newly built Afghan settlements, marking their territory with tents, mud huts, and countless clumps of ragged children. Tuesday, November 13th, 2001, the Ariana School, Peshawar. With several places to visit on our week-long itinerary, we began with the Ariana School. This private school for Afghan refugee children lies at the end of an airy courtyard. As Jacob and I stepped through the door, we were showered with pink flower petals, silver glitter, and an entire student body's applause. Jacob giggled at the overwhelming show of friendship and was delighted to give the gifts his first-grade class had sent, including a check the class raised by selling bookmarks.
We hope that this brings joy to your hearts and smiles to your faces for a long time.
Then a young girl reached out.
Where is the peace? It has gone away. We want peace. We need your and the world's support. We hope that the world will help to bring peace.
We were then taken to a first-grade class. They serenaded us. Wednesday, November 14th, 2001, Kachagari Refugee Camp. When I first visited Kachagari back in January of 1989, the tent was the predominant mode of shelter. Now, the camp is less of a camp and more of an intricate village. At the home of Seema Gul, Jacob donated Legos to her 4 young children. For 15 inspiring bridge-building minutes, we watched as the children assembled their structures. But the laughter of play soon turned into the reality of Kachagari. We saw many things, including women baking a bread called naan for their families. On the way back to our hotel, Jacob was digesting all that he'd seen, trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. Tell me what you thought about those camps today.
Well, sort of sad. Because some of their faces were really dirty.
Right.
And
Why do you think that is?
because they don't have any toys.
They don't have any toys?
To play with, so they only play with, like, mud.
Saturday, November 17th, 2001, the UNICEF field office, Peshawar. That evening, we prepared to drop off our second check from Jacob's class to UNICEF. The check was enough to cover the costs of building 1.5 playgrounds for a refugee camp. Sunday, November 18th, 2001, the Shamshatu refugee camp. When we finally arrived, there was hardly a child in sight. Until we were shown the camp's playground, and then we understood why. There, on seesaws and swings, we saw children at play. Real play. Not in an arid field or amidst trash, but in an actual playground constructed by UNICEF. The cost to recapture childhood? $500 per playground, including equipment and labor, which seemed, at least to Jacob and me, like a very good investment. Okay, Jacob, tell me about his name. It's Osama. Do you think you're ever going to forget that name?
No.
Can you give him a hug goodbye?
What?
Give him a hug goodbye.
Yeah, just me a hug goodbye.
Another good investment, taking this trip with Jacob. My hope for him, indeed for all American children coming of age as they are, in yet another era of global upheaval, is that they grow up knowing and caring about the world outside their borders. That they think about the consequences of war. That they reach out to those like the Afghan children we visited who are disenfranchised, uneducated, malnourished, scarred by war. If we've learned anything from September 11th, it is that isolationism does not work. We are all citizens of the world. We are all interconnected. As I stared down at my sleeping child, I realized he would not remember all the details of our trip when he gets older. But I hope I've at least planted a few seeds that will take root and grow.
Ladies and gentlemen, on the left is the nice view of the skyline and the Hudson River. Skyline of Manhattan coming up on the left-hand side.
In addition to your son, though, you planted seeds for a lot. That was so fascinating watching.
Well, thank you very much.
Really?
I appreciate it. We actually just got a letter from one of the women from the schools that we visited.
Wait,
and
hold it. Don't tell.
Sure.
We have to take a break.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're going to leave you on a cliffhanger because we want to know what the letter said. Deb's sticking around for more questions. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Pure Oxygen. Before the break, we saw the story of journalist Deborah Copaken. This past November, much to the shock and worry of others, Deborah took her 6-year-old son Jacob on a trip to Pakistan. They went personally to deliver money and gifts raised by Jacob's first grade class to aid Afghan refugee children. Deborah's back with more of the story. Right before the break, you were saying you received a letter.
Right. Recently, we received an email from one of the women that we visited there who runs a school called the Center for Street Children and Women, and she said donations have been pouring in since the article came out, so it's great to hear that. Actually.
Really nice to hear. You know, it was interesting looking at the videotape, no soldiers, no guns, no wounded, and I think what we're thinking, where is all of that? Did you see any of that while you were there?
No, let's remember that the war is going on in Afghanistan, and Pakistan is where the refugees come to be safe. We're thinking about Pakistan as a dangerous place in light of what happened to Danny Pearl. When we were there, I actually met Danny Pearl when we were there, and he...
This past trip you
while
met
we
him?
were there, and he said, should I bring my wife over here? But he was talking about the dangers of dysentery, not death. He was there to cover the Pakistan side of the story. Kabul had just fallen, and I said to him, are you going inside like everybody else in this hotel? And he said, oh, no, I'm here to cover the safe side of the story.
And clearly you felt safe, Deb, because you would have never taken Jacob in a situation that you thought was unsafe.
Oh, yeah.
So we were worried, but you clearly felt safe the whole time.
I absolutely felt safe. The burning of effigies that we saw on TV for the weeks after September 11th, every Friday at 1 o'clock, 90 guys would get together, burn an effigy, and that was what we were seeing every week, even though the rest of life in Pakistan was fine. There's always a fundamentalist element everywhere, even here in the United States.
But that doesn't reflect the whole feeling of the people. But you get that one little element, and that's what's put out. Did you get any anti-American sentiment? Did you get any of those feelings while you were there?
I didn't get anti-American sentiment so much as I got questions from the kids. Why? Why are you bombing us? We don't understand.
Yeah, because you're bombing, but you're also bringing food.
Right, we're bombing, we're dropping food. It's very confusing for Americans, clearly. It's very confusing for a child in Afghanistan who for 20 years their country's been ravaged by war, and yet, oh, here comes another war.
I love the reaction to the Legos, something that we just take so for granted here in this country, that Jacob, the innocence of children touches me always when I see it. So he just sort of wanders in, and he makes instant friends, it appeared.
Absolutely. He sat down with his Lego, and at first the kids sort of stood back and said they didn't know what it was and how to do it. And he goes, come on, guys, this is how you play. And of course, kids, they have the universal language of play.
Yeah.
And in fact, I told him he had to go out and pick a toy before we left that would not require language. And they had a lovely time playing.
What did you told him to expect, or had you told him anything to expect, and what do you think he got out of this trip?
I didn't tell him much. I said, we're going to go help some kids that really need some help. And after we saw the first refugee camp, he said to me, you know, Daddy had it rough growing up, but compared to these kids, he had it great. My husband immigrated from Russia, lived on welfare. You know, he knows that his dad had a hard time and his mother died when he was 15. So he has this image of, well, what hardship can be. But then all of a sudden, hardship is relative.
Yeah, that's right. You mentioned that you met Danny Pearl. What did you think, Deb, when you found out that he had been kidnapped? Someone that you had just met in November.
I just thought it was crazy. Danny Pearl, I met because Jacob was in the bathroom, and I tried to get some guy to go in there to check on him because he'd been in there for too long. And he came out and he said, oh, he's fine, he's giggling, no problems. And Kabul had just fallen. And I said to Danny, so are you going in to cover Afghanistan? And he said, oh, no, I'm here to cover the Pakistan side of the story.
Sort of like
the safe side.
Yeah, the safe side of the story. Yeah, it's
I mean, we have to remember that he was researching a story that, let's say he was researching a story here on the mafia or on neo-Nazism. He was researching a story that had a dangerous element, but nobody expected him to get kidnapped and least of all killed.
No one did. We thank you very much for your story. We are thrilled it's in O magazine
Thank you very
this
much.
month, really. The pictures are beautiful.
Well, thank you.
And what he brought back for show and tell, Danny, because somebody at the magazine said that he brought, not Danny, Jacob, that he brought a burqa.
A burqa, yeah.
That's a cool show and tell presentation. Thank you, Deb. Steph, what's coming up next?